Welcome aboard the Red Friday Podcast, coming at you live and loud from Armed Forces Brewing Company, where every Friday at 6 p.m. we paint the airwaves red in honor of our deployed heroes. It's not just a color, it's a commitment. Red Friday stands as a bold reminder to remember everyone deployed. Here, every Friday, we don our red with pride and raise our glasses high to those who serve. Join your dynamic hosts, Alan and MP, as they weave through the rich tapestry of military tales, engage with captivating guests in the Red Sea, and, of course, delve into the world of exceptional brews crafted right here at Armed Forces Brewing Company. Each episode is a blend of bravery and beers, where we explore the stories behind the brews, the craft of the pour, and the artistry that infuses every pint with a taste of freedom. So whether you're a beer lover, a supporter of our armed forces, or someone who loves a good story with a pint in hand, the Red Friday Podcast is your front row seat to inspiration, celebration, and our nation's unwavering resolve. Gear up, pour out, and tune in to the Red Friday Podcast. Wear your red, savor the brews, and join us in a salute to the courage that inspires us all.
Well, we are here on the Red Friday Podcast. MP, am I good on the audio there?
Crystal clear, brother.
Awesome. I can't hear you, though. Try it out. All right, everybody. Welcome to Red Friday Podcast. Alan and MP here. We've got a hero on here today as our guest.
That's
MP,
right.
You're a hero, too. You served.
No, that's all right. Everybody else deserves the respect. Victor's an amazing person, but we love him. We'll introduce him in a little bit. I'll jump in the gun. So what's everybody? Victor, you can still hear me, right? Alan, you can hear me yet?
I can't hear you.
It's all right.
Hang on, I'm going to pop off real quick, and then I'm going to come back in.
So what's up, everybody? MP here, part of the Red Friday Podcast.
Okay.
There's Alan. Can you hear me? Hey guys, real quick, while we figure out a couple technical difficulties, I'm going to roll a video for you. We're back.
I think we're back now.
Can you hear me?
Cool. All right. So here we go. Sorry about the technical difficulties there, but we're back. We've got a hero coming on. Victor Avila is here. He is a former, actually retired special agent with ICE. Who has been down at the southern border for a long time, keeping America safe. He's involved in a lot of different organizations and using his law enforcement expertise down there. But he's got quite a story to tell about his career with ICE and as a special agent, and specifically what happened back in February of 2011. And we're going to bring him into the studio. MP, you ready? Let's bring him in. There he is.
There you are. What's up, brother?
Good to see you guys.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Victor, doing good. Great to have you on. Wow, we got a real hero here. For everybody watching out there, Victor, you are a retired special agent with ICE, and we got to hang with you down at the Texas border. We got to meet you down there, and got to hang with you, and you really showed us the ropes of opened our eyes to what's going on and what's been going on down there at the border. But let's start off with your career. Okay. And I want to bring up Jaime as well, your partner, but I want you to tell us the story of what happened back in February of 2011. Maybe start with the career, how you got in with ICE, and a little background there for our viewers here. And let's go from there. We want to hear it all.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, born and raised in the border in Texas and El Paso, and worked most of the border all my career in different capacities. I worked at the county level. I was a state parole officer. I worked for the United States courts as a United States probation officer, and really got to learn the federal criminal justice system and the court system and how that works. That really helped me a lot when I applied and became a special agent with ICE. U.S. Customs and ICE were just merged when I get in. I was one of the first ones to actually go to the first academy, and was I went through the growing pains of the Department of Homeland Security. And as a matter of fact, just I think yesterday or a couple of days ago, they had given ICE has always had an identity crisis because nobody really knew what ICE was, and there's several divisions of ICE, and so the investigators versus the deportation officers were all kind of clumped in together. So then they called us HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, and it's been HSI since 2010. But as of a couple of days ago, HSI is actually going to be on their own, not under ICE anymore. And so some people are for it, some are against it. To me, it's all good. I just want to be able to go after the bad guy. And so, but what a lot of people don't understand is when they hear ICE, they forget, they kind of think immigration immediately, right? But they forget that it's a lot more than immigration. As a matter of fact, the U.S. Customs Service was the primary agency to investigate child exploitation cases. And now HSI is the premier agency to investigate human trafficking investigations, money laundering, commercial fraud, anything that touches the border. If it has a nexus to our border, we have the jurisdiction to investigate it. Cultural artifacts, things that people steal from museums,
antiquities.
A lot of times, cultural property. A lot of people think the fake Gucci bag and all that. Yeah, we do that too. But when you think about it, we do the pharmaceutical side of it and try to keep it safe. And the toothpaste that you use at home, that it's the real toothpaste, not a counterfeit toothpaste made in China that you have no idea what's in there, that you put it in your mouth every day. So there's a lot of control at these borders to try to keep the homeland safe. And of course, narcotics and the illegal movement of drugs and people. But so I worked a lot of different capacities. And at one point it took me to Mexico to actually serve on the other side of the border. And the first one was in Ciudad Juarez on the other side of El Paso, Texas, was in 2008. And let me tell you what an eye-opener that was, because that city was at that time the most dangerous city in the world, with 350 homicides a month. And it was just death, surrounded by death, and almost all of it cartel related. A lot of missing women and children. If you remember that, there's been movies made about it. Hundreds and hundreds of young women were found in this abandoned desert the bodies were being dumped. And all of us, HSI, FBI, everybody, we had these meetings to come together to see who the heck is doing this, because it wasn't just obviously one person or one organization. You had a lot of people committing femicide, what they call it. And if you didn't want your girlfriend, or you're married and got your girlfriend pregnant, You could literally kill her and dump her in the desert, and no one would ever know. No one was ever going to investigate. No one was ever going to find out. And so a lot of those type of crimes were happening in that area, and so that really exposed me with making the cases bigger than just the local, what we call bag and tag cases. And then, of course, the hanging bodies from the bridges. I got to see that. The backhoes digging up these clandestine makeshift, where they bury all these bodies. Well, you have to put the bodies somewhere, they can't dissolve all of them. And so really, really eye opener, and a lot of money laundering, a lot of bulk cash smuggling, because the money, obviously the finances attached to the drugs. So you have a lot of issues with money laundering, businesses, banks, the banking system. We have the jurisdiction to investigate the Bank Secrecy Act, which is when you start doing your transactions at your bank account, they're going to notify us. They're going to notify the police that you're depositing $9,000 and trying to avoid detection from the IRS. And so all those things, we were working a lot of these things, and then I became very focused and got trained, and eventually became a subject matter expert in human trafficking investigations. And this is mostly for the exploitation of women and children. Some of it combined with smuggling, but smuggling is different. We saw smuggling at the border is what's happening now. People get brought up, smuggled, and then some others continue to be exploited through trafficking, and that's either through mostly sex slave trade or the forced labor trade. And so I started doing that, rescuing a lot of victims, women and children. Cases, those are very difficult cases because they're not, they're around you, but they're very hard to detect. And it's one of those things they call it's a violation of law that happens in plain sight. And you're like, well, it's in plain sight, but I can't see it because it could be a victim right next door in your apartment or a house that you live in your regular neighborhood, and you have no idea that there's a victim there, either being held as a slave for sex slave purposes or forced labor. And so I started doing that, and then I eventually went to Mexico City as an accredited diplomat and worked at the U.S. Embassy there, worked a lot of money laundering cases, drug cases, and of course, human trafficking. Man, Mexico is one of those hubs where they were just bringing lots and lots of mostly women and children, little boys as well, to the U.S. for sexual exploitation. I mean, horrific conditions of exploitation, prostitution, forced prostitution, and so I was really getting into that. And then you mentioned what happened here throughout my career there. I was almost there 2 years serving in Mexico, and one day when I got back into the country, I got this assignment from my bosses out of the blue to go.
Let me throw in one question real quick. So during the first part that you were just talking about, Victor, are you guys undercover a lot?
A lot of undercover. So in my world, the special agent, which is a federal criminal investigator, an 1811 series, you come out of the academy and able to do what they call casual undercover. Yeah, that means you're not a certified undercover agent, but you could do casual undercover, meaning that I follow you into a 7-Eleven. That's what I do. We get taught to follow you, and people sometimes think that we're hiding behind a bush. No, we're right next to you. You're ordering a big gulp, and I have a big gulp right behind you, and that's how I follow you. And you go into a restaurant, and I get a table right next to you, and so that's casual undercover. Then we actually have certified undercover agents. I was not a certified undercover agent that will actually have a different identity and will get incorporated into some of these organizations and schemes. And we as case agents use a lot of the undercover agents. I'll give you a quick example. We have an undercover agent, for example, that has a CDL license, right? I'm doing a deal with my sources and we need a driver. Well, we incorporate our undercover agent to become the driver of that load. of drugs, and or incorporate I mean, many things. Some I could say, some I cannot, but
Sure.
just know that we yes, a lot of covert operations, overt operations, all you can think of. And I did a case where I did a couple of cases where we got to do what you would normally think that you would see in Hollywood in a movie, the fun stuff, the undercover, the cameras, the audio, the hidden cameras, the pole cams, under physical undercover following and stuff. And so that was fun. It's always fun when you get to do that. Wiretaps and what we call Title III wiretaps. We start listening in to phone calls, and there's a procedure to go through that. And now you have a team and surveillance teams, and these big cases. You start taking down organizations, and it feels good to it's all about public safety for me. It's about helping the community stay safe, because there's a lot of people out there doing up to no good. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, drugs and human sex trafficking. That's the lowest of the lowest.
Victor, I have a question for you.
Investigate and wow, that's crazy. Now, were you guys in collaboration or with Mexican authorities, or were you guys on your own a lot of times in cover, or how that work?
So in Mexico, it's very very overt. They know we're there. We have absolutely no authority there. It's all under the authority of that government. In this case, Mexico, whatever country we're assigned to, we do everything through them. And in Mexico, when I was there, it was very, very hands-on. I mean, a lot. I think I did more things in Mexico than I think I did stateside. Weird stuff that I would never thought I would do in my career, but that's kind of what the mission called for, because our mission was, first of all, there's a part of the mission was training. Let's train the Mexican government on very, very police basic tactics, interrogations, conducting investigations, court proceedings. Mexico has a closed criminal justice system versus ours that's open. Ours is open, meaning that we have cross-examination, and the government has to provide the defense the evidence that they have, and vice versa. And you fight it out that way. That does not exist in Mexico. Mexico, you're done. And I would always kid around, if Mexico actually would open up their law book and apply it, you're over. It's over. You don't want that to happen, because they have very, very strict laws, from immigration to everything else. And so it's all written. And we were trying to kind of, they wanted to, or at least part of the initiative was that they wanted to kind of incorporate their system to ours when it comes to like a jury, when it comes to those things that don't exist over there. And so that was a big challenge. Very, very basic things that even I kind of kid around. Even if you watch a little bit of Law and Order, you would think, you would think that you knew certain things that, for example, I never interview two defendants or two subjects in the same room at the same time. I separate them, right?
Yeah.
That's almost kind of common sense or common knowledge. Well, not over there. Over there, like, we arrested 4 people, and all 4 at the same time, and they're taking their statements next to each other. Like, no, they're looking at each other to see what to say. No, it doesn't work that way. You got to put them in separate rooms and work them against each other, So stuff like that. And so that was one thing, was training. And then, of course, was actually sharing intel on drug traffickers, human traffickers, money launderers, and actually getting to the point of arresting some of these people through the Mexican government. What we do is sometimes we would grab a warrant in the U.S., and then Mexico would issue their warrant based on our warrant, based on our evidence, which it's called a provisional arrest warrant, a PAW. And then they go pick them up, because now they have their judge issue the warrant, and then we pick them up, and eventually we probably will extradite them and bring them to the U.S. As a matter of fact, they just extradited a pretty high-level cartel, Jalisco New Generation, to the U.S. In D.C. I think it was yesterday, and he's going to be coming before the court later on this month. so it happens all the time. People are getting arrested. A lot of it, the U.S. is heavily involved in providing intel. And then do we do it through vetted units? DEA has their vetted unit. We have ours. And these are supposed to be trusted police forces that we're able to share information. It doesn't work all the time. But then it was when I was in Mexico, it was like the busiest I'd ever been in my life, the most I ever worked. It was really overwhelming, the amount of work. As a matter of fact, the office, the ICE office at the embassy in Mexico City was the busiest office in the world. And wow. This is compared to Saks, El Paso, Miami, New York. And it was, at first it was 4 agents, and then it was 7. It was just an enormous amount of work, because not only are we doing investigations, we're also taking care of collateral requests from our stateside offices. Hey, can you find this fugitive? Hey, can you find this witness? Because we need them for a case in the States. And so we would go look for fugitives, go look for witnesses, a lot of things like that. Sometimes documents that are needed for Mexican nationals that were arrested, and they the defense is trying to not prove anything, and they're like, hey, we need some kind of proof that this guy is actually from this town or this village, and we would go get the paperwork. We get it. And so a lot of different things like that were going on. But the biggest thing was probably obviously the drug trafficking, the cartels, and human trafficking. There's a huge hub in Mexico City where they were just basically, these human traffickers would go out and look for victims. And so you had 2 different kinds. The one that I worked a lot with was that young age group. Child traffickers are different. And when I say child, for me, a child is a toddler, 4 or 5-year-old, and sure. And then there's a different category of child, obviously, the 12-year-old to like the 17-year-old. And that was probably the biggest chunk of victims that these guys went. A lot of the times people think that they were kidnapped or they were forcibly taken. Most of the time, almost all of the time, that was never the case. They were coerced. They were tricked into coming with this guy. They have these human traffickers, young-looking guys, hip with the car. They'll go to these towns in the plaza. You got a 14-year-old walking around the plaza eating ice cream, and within an hour, he's in her car, and she's gone. Voluntarily goes with him, and then eventually is non-voluntarily, because immediately they start the process to smuggle her into the U.S. and then take her to Atlanta, New York, Miami, Houston, wherever, where there she's going to see 20, 30, 40, 50 Johns a night at a certain amount of pay. Back then, it was about $60. I imagine now it's a little bit more. So you do the math. With one victim, seeing that many men every day, there's no time off here. And so now say there's 50 victims. Say there's 1,000 victims. That's why human trafficking is now up there and actually supersedes drug trafficking proceeds, because of the billions of dollars it generates, because that victim keeps on giving and giving and giving. Drugs, you have to sell. You sell the kilo of cocaine. Well, you got to go get another kilo of cocaine, right? And you got to go through that process. That victim keeps on giving until the victim either dies, can no longer produce, but they take them to the hospital. They get sick. They get pregnant. All these things happen to them. Obviously, you can imagine the physical trauma and emotional trauma. These victims they're not bound and gagged or chained. They're just broken. They're broken physically. They're broken psychologically. And they'll send them to the store. Go to the store, go to the mall, go buy condoms, go buy the clothing, go buy the shoes. Sometimes they make them dance. Sometimes they make them strippers, all that. And you think, a lot of people, the first thing, why didn't she just escape? Why didn't she just leave? Because they're terrified. They're so afraid. If they had a passport, it's been taken away. They own them and they control them like a slave, a sex slave. And sometimes they do get the courage to literally run. Some have had cases where they literally just ran out into the middle of the street and someone found them and took them to the police department. Sometimes tip lines, all types of ways that we would encounter these victims. But with the way the border is right now, that is just out of control now, because the cartels didn't deal with human trafficking back then. Cartels were drug trafficking organizations. But then all this movement with the Biden administration and the bodies and the smuggling and the trafficking, and the cartel said, wait a minute, what's going on right here? That's a lot of money over there. We want our cut. And now the cartel controls all of it. They get the cut, they get the money because they control the plazas. And now the cartels learn that a lot of these victims, even young men, young women, they'll exploit them even based on the fee that they're owed for the smuggling fee. Remember, they all have to pay a fee to come into the United States. So the cartel will say, the victim or the illegal alien will say, you know what, I don't have the $8,000. Okay, well,
work it off.
Work it off. And how are you going to work it off? Not necessarily in the sex slave trade, although that happens, but you're going to sell drugs. You're going to sell pills. You're going to clean houses. You're going to work at a restaurant for minimum wage. And I think you understand that they'll never probably ever pay that off. And so now that's an indentured servitude type of a trafficking situation. And so that is very, very prevalent a lot. I mean, a lot of it happens.
This is happening all over America and all the cities. We're these cities and all over the place.
MP?
Yeah, I was going to ask you more about that. We were talking about human trafficking and everything, and before you had mentioned the forced labor trade. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
So labor,
just getting into it, but
that's a good question, because labor slave trade doesn't get a lot of attention. A lot of the sex trafficking is what gets the attention. But man, from domestic help to last year, there was a big case that was taken down in Florida where 9, 10, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds were working at a chicken factory. Obviously, you can't work at it. It's all the violation of our labor laws. But I did a case, a very horrific case of I think the boy was maybe about 10 or 11, and he was basically the slave of the house, fixing the yard. It was a big house with acreage. And I mean, sometimes I hate saying these stories because I know they're Debbie Downers, but just so you can realize, they had him living in the chicken coop with the chickens, and that's where he lived. That's where
was he like part of like an American families, or was he part of like the was he, who was he working for? Like who was running the chicken factory where he was, and like, are they the kids that come in? Are the kids like assigned to like an American family, and hey, you're gonna work this off? Or are they like with another illegal immigrants family? Like,
it's funny you mentioned the word family, because a lot of the human trafficking organizations are family operated. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, it's the mom. The mother of that family is the kingpin, and she has her sons. I did several cases where it was the mom and her sons were the traffickers. The mom was the kingpin. She actually helped groom the as soon as they got the child, they would groom her, tell her how to use a condom, change her clothes. I mean, immediately train her before they send her out. And then the men, they had people in Mexico, people in the U.S., but it's organized. It's not. Don't think of it as, well, we're just going to put you there and see what happens. No. This is organized. They respond to somebody. They live with usually they don't live with a family. They live in a apartment complex or a home. Not necessarily a brothel. Sometimes, sure, there are places that are brothels, but mostly it's just a regular place. The trafficker or the John usually comes to the victim, but there are cases where the victim is taken or transported around. It does happen, but most of what I saw is they come to them. So they have them in an apartment complex, or they'll come to a hotel, they'll advertise it, and then they come and do their business there.
Yeah, on the forced
So
labor
Victor,
part,
let's go back to February
Yeah.
of 2011. Let's continue the story of your career and what happened to you, and let's go through that. Tell us about your partner and what you went through down there.
Yeah, it actually was February 14th on Valentine's Day when we got the assignment. I was very upset about the assignment, not only because it was Valentine's, it ruined my plans with my wife. My wife was very upset, but I literally got into the country that morning of February 14th on another Afghan smuggling case that I was working that was going very well. We're about to take them down. And so I was very upset when I got the heads up that, hey, they're going to send you to Monterey. And I'm like, why me? I just got here, right? I'm like, well, there's other agents that work here. And they said, well, that's what it was. That's what they said in the meeting. So sure enough, my supervisor after lunch gives me the assignment, and I challenged it with him. I made him call the agents from our Monterey office to say, well, what the hell's going on? I mean, they wanted us to go pick up some boxes. And I'm like, well, send it in a helicopter, send it in a helicopter, send it on our diplomatic pouch van. And they're like, no, we already went through all that. We already discussed all that. And they had actually discussed it months before. This is February 14th, and they had been talking about this since the December before. And so I got brought in at the very last. And in law enforcement world, it's a big no-no. You have to be briefed. You have to know what's going on. You don't just people get killed when you don't know what's going on. You don't get briefed, and then you show up. What we call it, what we say a lot in law enforcement: if you don't participate in the briefing, you don't get to play. You don't get to go to if you don't go to the briefing for the search warrant or arrest warrant, you're not just going to show up and see what you're going to do. You're going to have a role. Those things are very well planned out. Well, I was expecting that thing to be well planned, and it wasn't, because every time we drove on this highway, which is the main corridor from Mexico City straight up to Texas, it was at least 3 or 4 vehicles of escorts of U.S. personnel, Mexican military or Mexican federal police, and we're all escorted out in a caravan. Because I did it for agents when they were leaving with their families, leaving the country. We would literally escort them out, drive 11 hours to the border, and drop them off on stateside in Texas. And so all of a sudden, they're like, you need to go tomorrow. I'm like, there's no time to afford to do an operational plan or call the federal police or the military to like this. No, like just go take Jaime with you. And I met Jaime. Jaime had gotten to the country the week before. He was out of the Laredo office. The Laredo office was working a very good and very big arms trafficking case. So big that we couldn't handle with the manpower that we had in Mexico. So we made a deal with the office and said, all right, you need to start bringing your agents into Mexico on a TDY, what we call temporary duty, and 30, 60, 90-day intervals, and we will set them up here and we'll kind of guide them. But they got to work their own case here because we just don't have the manpower to do it for them. And so that was going on for a while. Jaime was one of those replacement agents that had just come in to relieve another one. And they introduced me to him. We exchanged numbers. We used the Nextel radios a lot back then. And then another agent that had been to my apartment in Mexico said, hey, I'll take him to your apartment tomorrow morning. After I had done all this challenge, after my supervisor shut me down, I forced my supervisor to knock on the door and talk to the deputy attaché, which he did. And we told him, listen, that we have the intel that this corridor, a big portion of Highway 57 is controlled by Los Zetas cartel. And they're having firefights and shootings with the Mexican cartel, with the other cartels, with the military, with the police. And we knew it wasn't safe. Everyone knew that. I mean, that's what we did in Mexico, right? The ambassador had even put out an alert saying no U.S. personnel is allowed to drive on that highway, either for personal reasons. You're not, and I'm like, what about the alert? And they ignored all that. And so my deputy attaché comes out, and we told him all this, and his words were, and I quoted them in my book, and I quote him right now, and I'll quote him until I die. he said he wasn't aware of any security issues in Mexico, and walked away and turned around and shut the door. And I said, well, the whole fucking country in Mexico is a security issue. Sorry for the language, but that's what I said because I was so frustrated. How dare you say that? You know, Mexico was critical level 4 under the State Department, just like Iraq, just like Afghanistan. And he had just been kind of newer to the country. We had been there a little bit longer, and believe me, we've been on the ground a lot. And so for him to say something like that, it was very devastating, and kind of shrugged the shoulders like, well, when you're ordered, you're ordered. And so now my boss looks at me, my supervisor says, hey, well, make arrangements, man. So I get with my friend in Monterey, I get on the phone, we're discussing where to meet. And sure enough, the next day, Jaime comes up to my apartment, 6:30 in the morning. We take off in my armored Suburban that it was issued to me, a 2009 Suburban. Just him and I, and we headed out there. We ended up driving a little bit more than them. We made contact about 11:30 in the morning at kilometer marker 100, exchanged those boxes, and there was a lot of boxes, huge. Like I wasn't expecting. I thought they told me it was going to be some tracking devices, surveillance equipment for another.
We're just going to ask what's in the boxes.
Right. That's how they told me that it was going to be, like electronic surveillance equipment. Some of it was going to be for us. Some of it was going to be for the federal government. And so I'm thinking, there was a Pelican brief, and I was thinking that, but man, I have the pictures. It was the third row seat and the second row seat had to lower down because the Suburbans have an additional door that opens. And you guys have seen, obviously, armored vehicles. It has the regular hatchback, then an additional traditional door with a little window. And so it kind of compacts the cargo area. And so we pushed all these boxes in there and shut it. And, it took 5 minutes. And we used the restroom there at the little restaurant. I told Jaime if he wanted to eat anything. He's like, no, I wanted to eat at the Subway that we had passed by because there's a Subway, there's a Church's Chicken. And so we headed back. After lunch, we had a great lunch. He took over the wheel. I was working on, as a matter of fact, I was doing a human trafficking conference, and I was looking for a fugitive. So I was going to take time while he was driving for me to get some work done on this thing called the BlackBerry. Remember those? Yeah. So within 15, 20 minutes of Jaime driving, we got approached by 2 SUVs. First, they passed us at a high rate of speed. And Jaime is the one that gave me the heads up. Stay heads up. And I looked up, and you see the silhouette of the long gun sticking in between the seat and the back seat. And it's occupied by several occupants. And then they're flying. Because I told Jaime, keep it by between 70, 72 miles an hour. It was the first time he had ever driven an armored vehicle. So those suckers are heavy. They're almost 6 tons heavy. And so they navigate differently. They accelerate differently. They brake differently. And so the open road is possibly the best way to, if you're going to get any training, the training didn't exist. It does now, unfortunately, right? Now it does exist. You have to get certified to drive a armored vehicle and learn how to shoot from an armored vehicle. But obviously I didn't get that training. I also learned how to drive one. Just here you go, do it, trial by fire. And so the open road would give them more ability to get used to it. And I told him that when we hit the outskirts of Mexico City, for him to pull over and I would take over, because I wasn't going to do that to him. Mexico traffic, as you can imagine, is horrible. And we were going to be hitting Mexico City at rush hour, which is about between 7 and 9 p.m. in Mexico. It's the rush hour is later over there. So he's driving. We see this car, and they're gone. They're flying, and he's like, I don't know who that was, man. We don't know. Who the hell knows, right? In Mexico. Then, before you know it, we're up on them. I mean, they slowed down to like 25 miles an hour, and there's a 2-lane highway, so you guys can know, 2-lane going north, 2-lane going south, with a big grassy median. And when I call it highway, that's just the name of it, but it's the interstate, it's the toll road, it's the safe road, it's the one that you're supposed to take, right? And we're on the far right lane, and these guys immediately started conducting a rolling roadblock where the SUV in front of us brakes dramatically, and then at the simultaneously the vehicle next to us pushes to the right. This is what we train to do, to pull people over, and they were doing it to us. And instinctively, Jaime initially tries to navigate in between the two SUVs, but as soon as he accelerated, the car being so heavy, it's not that fast, and they immediately reassessed. And then the second time they did that, the vehicle right next to Jaime's window, they lowered the windows and pull out the guys from the back seat and in the passenger seat, pull out AKs and are pointing and yelling, "Stop, stop, stop," pull over in Spanish, to pull over and stop. And I tell Jaime, go, go, go. And he can't. He's trying to avoid a wreck. So the one is braking. So he's braking, they're pushing, braking, pushing. Eventually we come to a complete stop on the right shoulder of the freeway there. And these eight or so, shooters come out, long guns. They kind of do a U shape in front of us. We have our hands up immediately. Their main guy, of course, we don't know that they're cartel members. And I tell people, because when I'm telling the story, sometimes people are imagining these guys in camouflage, military, or all black. None of that. They were dressed like you and me. T-shirts, caps, some no hats, very, very thin, fit, very short, soldier-looking guys, like Southern Mexican, Central American kind of look. And the one that the leader of that squad came to Jaime's door, he had a handgun, and he comes and yanks on the door and opens the door. The door opened. And it shocked the hell out of him, Jaime, and me, because again, the Suburban was programmed to unlock all four doors when it was placed in park, not anymore. And so, but Jaime immediately, it didn't take like a second. It swung open, Jaime grabbed the handle and swung it right back. And we shut the door and locked the hell out of the doors, and they kept on, yanking and hitting the armored glass and open, and it's all in Spanish, to get out, open the door, get out, get out, get out. I'm yelling at them in Spanish that we're Americans. You have us confused. Whoever you think we are, we're not that person. We're U.S. Embassy employees. We're diplomats. Look at the plates. This is a diplomatic vehicle. We're Americans. Over and over and over. I was yelling it at the top of my lungs. I even told them, let me identify myself. I have my diplomatic passport. Let me identify myself. You're not who we think we are. Get the fuck out, get out. All in Spanish. Get out, open the door, get out. And then
who do you think they thought you were?
Their story is that they thought, as a matter of fact, the story initially came from the Mexican federal police, that they said that they thought that we were the chief of police of the nearest town of San Luis Potosí, and that chief of police drive them around in a blue Suburban. I'm sorry, I couldn't swallow that. That's a crock of shit. But they believe me. Police shootings usually happen really fast, 7 seconds. This was not that. This was a long time. They had plenty. They could see us. They could hear us, which something that I didn't get that confirmation until years later in the trial, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, until 2017, where they actually testified in court and said, oh yeah, we heard him. We heard that he was American. We knew that he was American because he told us, and we knew that he was a diplomat, and they knew because they heard me. I always said it. And when you say something, you're like, am I going crazy here? Am I the only one? What the hell? Like, nobody believes me. Like, I know. I told them over and over. Well, they actually tested. I never had a scumbag evildoer corroborate my story, but they actually did. But
so now everybody's wondering now, what? In court they testified? So keep telling the story. We want to hear about it.
So all of a sudden, in this commotion, that guy, the main guy, he shoots several rounds towards like the front door, like Jaime's door and the tire. I remember we're like this, and I remember telling Jaime, and I apologize for the language, but that's just the way I said it. But I said, did he just fucking shoot at the door? Like it was denial. I'll tell you, that's what it was. It was denial. Like, I didn't want that to be.
Yeah.
It was like pop, 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 and what the? because he didn't shoot it at the window. He could have shot it at the window, and it's bulletproof, and he could have shot it, but he didn't. He shot it towards the door and the front tire. So now I'm thinking, is he trying to disable the vehicle? I didn't understand it. I was shocked. I went into this denial immediately, like, what the hell just happened? And then in the middle of all that commotion, 2 shooters come my way, and they insert a AK-47 barrel and a handgun. Because my window had been lowered a couple of inches when we hit that lock buttons, we inadvertently lowered my window without knowing. We didn't know. This whole time the window was down and we didn't know. We're yelling at each other, and then all of a sudden they came at me, and then the first thing I did is just kind of post it, try to make myself small, and I got the button and raised the window, and it caught both barrels. And then I see them wiggling the guns. And then without notice, they open fire into the cabin, striking Agent Zapata multiple times. They got me once in the chest and twice in my left leg. And I have hearing loss in my left ear because I was doing this. And the gun was here. I grabbed the handgun. And I remember it just charred my skin on my finger, just peeled my index finger and thumb area. I don't know what I was trying to do. I just wanted it to stop, And then they pulled the guns out, and I just kept my finger on the window, and it's because that window goes up very slowly, and it goes up, and they were just spraying over 100 rounds. They counted at least 100 impacts on the Suburban and in the glass and the undercarriage. A lot of bullets came in. A lot of people think, well, it's a bulletproof vehicle. Well, doesn't mean that it stops everything, but a lot of them were lodged in the boxes, believe it or not, and then behind our seat. And so I tell Jaime, go, 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 because he yells out, I'm hit. And I said, go. And I actually grab, the gear lever, and I slam it down to drive, and he puts his foot on the gas, and I push my hand on his leg, and we crashed that vehicle in front of us that was blocking us. She tried to get back on the highway. Jaime became unresponsive, and our Suburban basically just glided over just from the far right shoulder into the median in the middle part of the highway. I tried to get the steering wheel back to get it back, and that's what they kept on shooting. They disabled it, flattened tires and everything. And wow. I see one of the SUVs take off. Then I see the second SUV take off, but then it makes a U-turn, and they park right in front of the Suburban. 2 shooters come out, and they look at me, and I look at them, and they point their AKs right at me from in front of the hood, and they just open fire, trying to penetrate the bulletproof glass. And you can see pictures online, the 2 bubbles, and I was just kind of frozen at that point. I went through all the fight, flight, freeze, all that stuff that you hear about. I actually went through every single one of those. At that point, I froze, and I thought, well, this is it. And I think they thought I was dead because I was already bleeding from this one, and I was bleeding from my leg. I didn't know, by the way. I didn't know that I had been shot. I had a lot of shrapnel and glass breakage on my face, and I had a lot of blood. And then when they left, I started attending to Jaime. I made a call to the embassy, which is recorded. You can hear it online, telling them that we had been shot in the highway. It took 40 minutes. 40 minutes. That's a long time. Just right there on the highway for the trusted police to show up. I say this all the time because this is the difference. When you're not in the U.S. and you guys that have been all over the world, all of a sudden you're reminded that you're not at home, that you're not in the U.S., that you cannot pick up your phone and call 911 and rescue's going to come. It doesn't happen, not even in Mexico. As a matter of fact, when I did call, the only person that I trusted in the Mexican government was the head of our VETA unit, and he had to send like specific people, not just anybody, because we don't know who they are. We don't know if they work with the cartel. There's so much corruption is embedded in the police departments, right, and federal police. And so, he deployed a helicopter from Mexico City, and eventually the cavalry showed up. They took Jaime and I. there to the local hospital in the state of San Luis Potosí. They flew us over there, and we got really good care. They took Jaime into one trauma room. They took me into another. They didn't know that we were Americans. I didn't tell them that. I use the word petrified a lot. I was so scared. That's when the fear hit me. When that flight over, it was an 8-minute flight over the hospital. I was a dead man on that flight. And it feels horrible because I used to work these cases where the cartel go to the hospital and kill people. That they find out that they didn't kill them or they made it. And I remember pleading, begging my federal police officer friend, the Mexican police officer friend, to please send people. And eventually they did. It took them about a good hour. And these big SWAT type of ERT type guys showed up and eventually surrounded the hospital. No one in, no one out, and it was secure at that point. But that's when I actually told them who I was, that I was an American, that U.S. Embassy diplomat, all this stuff, and I actually got very good medical care. It was a good hospital, and then eventually we got flown to Houston. My family got taken out, and well, it turned out our lives upside down, if you can imagine.
So get us, wow. Get us to how did this, obviously there was a court case, people were arrested, so how did they find out who these assailants were, and how did you get to that point?
This is where I tell people that when governments want things done, they can get done, and this is a perfect example of that. The Mexican government basically said, let's go. Carte blanche. U.S. government, come in, help us. Let's go pick these guys up. And that's a good thing, right? So they did. And they did it. I hope a couple of my friends were on that assignment. And I hope one day they're able to talk about it. I can't talk a lot about those details. I have a couple of videos and stuff. I could just only tell you that it was old school police work. I'll put it to you that way. That it took about a week, and they rounded them up. And while they were rounding them up, they were rescuing kidnapped victims. They were, I mean, you can imagine all the shit that these cartels are continuing to function, right? And they eventually, there was 8 of them. One of them was presumed dead, so they caught the other 7. And I had never seen we were talking about the provisional arrest warrant, the PAW. This was issued almost immediately. So the warrants were issued in the U.S. and almost simultaneously were issued in Mexico. And they said, boom, put them on a plane to D.C. And they did. And it took until 2017 for all the arrangements to happen. Now, I have a lot of issues with our criminal justice system, the way it went down. Because remember, I used to work for the U.S. courts, and I knew that there's going to be a plea deal, whatever. These guys, by the way, were all looking at the death penalty. But because we have a treaty with Mexico, and the extradition rules means that the U.S. removes the death penalty from the table. And so they're all looking at a mandatory life sentence. And I was good with that. Whether they pled guilty or went to trial, found guilty, that's what they were looking at. Well, we get informed one day, my wife and I were in the D.C., and they tell us, 5 of them, they're not going to trial. They're going to plead guilty. Oh, really? Good. That's good. And they're like, well, these are the sentences that we're recommending: 35, 34, 28, 25, and 12 years. I said, what? For killing a U.S. federal agent? The charges were murder, attempted murder of a internationally protected person, and weapons charges. And I said, who departed from that sentence? This is an actual sentence. The sentencing guidelines call for life imprisonment. Yeah. So there's a thing called a departure, a 5K departure, which I did a lot in my career as a federal probation officer and as an agent. I understand that, but there was never for the killing of a federal agent, or let's see what kind of participation or cooperation they gave, right? So if they were going to give up El Chapo, maybe I could have jumped on board with that. But they weren't giving any information based on what the government was telling me. that the substantial assistance that they gave that merit them departing from that sentence. So the Zapata family and I were devastated with those sentences. That's what it was. That's what they got sentenced. Now, 2 of them never opened their mouth. These were the 2 that came out afterwards and they shot me try to get through the window. They never said anything. So they went to trial, and we had a trial in 2017. The other 5 testified against those 2. Whoop-de-doo, big deal. That happens all the time. It still doesn't merit that type of departure from the sentence. And that's when they testified about them, that in fact they heard me yelling that we were Americans. By the way, there's a lot of things that we knew about that came out in that trial, and this is Los Zetas cartel, how organized these cartels are. These guys, the weapons that they used, first of all, 2 of the weapons were part of Operation Fast and Furious, if you remember that. These are U.S. weapons that came from the U.S., allowed by the Biden administration, Obama, whatever, same difference, to walk into Mexico and arm these cartels. 2 of those killed my partner and killed Agent Brian Terry, the Border Patrol agent, 2 months before our shooting. So that was that. And then a lot of the sophistication came out of these cartels because they're not gangs. They had a fleet card for the vehicles that they check out, like assigned to them. The weapons are checked out. I mean, this is organized. This is like an operation,
sophisticated, right? Yeah.
Very sophisticated. Yeah. The money, the tracking, the expenses, like what the hell? But the difference is that these guys kill for a living. They're sicarios, or they're kidnappers or extortionists, or whatever it is that they're assigned to do. So all that came out in trial. They were found guilty by the jury, sentenced to life imprisonment. All right, great.
I just want to clarify this. This is in U.S. federal court.
U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C., in federal court. So they were found guilty. We kind of thought, okay, this is it. They're all in jail. They're going to be there for a while. Good. 2 years later, those 2 that went to trial appealed their sentence. And they said that the murder conviction was invalid because the murder happened outside of the United States. And so that statute that was used by the Department of Justice couldn't be used. And the DC Circuit Court of Appeals agreed with them and suspended or vacated, dismissed the murder charge. I'm telling you, it was a hard day to get that phone call, because I was the one kind of, the communicator for the Zapata family. And I had to call them and let them know that there's nobody in custody for the murder of their son. Wow. And they're still in custody for the other charges. So I'm like, what's going on here? That murder statute had been used many, many times. There was other appellate cases, but politics sometimes I think gets in the way. So I called my congressman, my senators, and the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association, and we got something going. And it took us 2 years, but we fixed the law so that won't happen again. And we passed a new law called the Jaime Zapata and Victor Avila Federal Officer Employee Protection Act. So that can't happen again. Unfortunately,
Who sponsored that bill? Who sponsored that bill, Victor?
Ron Cornyn, from senator from Texas, and then a bunch of them. Ted Cruz got on it. Michael McCall. A lot of people got on it. Bipartisan, by the way. And it was a one pager, basically taking that part away. That doesn't matter where the murder happens, and also it included that it was more protections for the family members of the employee as well. So we strengthened the law. Pelosi blocked it twice from getting to the floor on the House side, and eventually I learned a lot of how these laws get passed. It has nothing to do with the chamber. It all happens outside, right? And it's very, very frustrating. But eventually she couldn't stop it. So I learned how you can get things done in DC when it wants to, that even the ones that oppose it can't stop it. And that's what happened the third time. She couldn't do anything procedurally, I'll say, that it hit to the floor and it passed and became law. And then, of course, Biden had this big signing ceremony on the desk with all these people standing behind him signing the new law. But I wasn't there, and neither was the Zapata family because they didn't invite us.
Wow.
And so that one opened up old wounds because it reminded me that it's political. What a shame, right? And it's political. Why is it political? This is the death of a federal agent that gave his life in the service of the homeland. And if anybody should be, there should be his family standing right there. And I don't care if it's Biden. I mean, the irony of life, right? I mean, right here is the law signed by Biden and Pelosi. But that's what it is, right? I mean, you do what you have to do with the system that you have. And but yeah, that hurt because they definitely, obviously they know that we don't align politically, so we didn't get the invite to attend.
So did you retire after this whole thing? Is that when you retired?
It took me I still worked for another almost 4 years.
Okay.
And then retired in 2015.
Then what did you do after that?
I wrote the book. I had no idea what to do. I mean, I've been in law enforcement since the age of 22, and then all of a sudden you're like, what do you do? This is all I know how to do. And so I wrote the book, and then because of the book, I started getting doing these news hits. A friend of mine was the first one years ago. Said, "Hey, you want to go do a hit for a news network?" And I said, "What the hell is that? What's a news hit?" You know, you put the earpiece and you speak to the camera and you talk about for 4 minutes whatever that going on in the news.
Yeah, we were on a couple of those with you and Jason.
Yeah. And so I started doing that, and I started getting on Fox and Newsmax and OAN and Telemundo. I did a Univision one earlier today, and so I still continue to do those. Then I started speaking about it. I started doing. I'm a paid speaker to go, and I usually speak to a lot of police and military groups. I'm starting to speak a lot more to private corporations, because our story is there's a lot of faith involved there. Obviously, I'm here by the grace of God. There's a lot of believe it or not, even when I speak in front of the police groups and military, I never get questions about. Very rarely do I get questions about the actual shooting and the tactics. They want to know about the aftermath, about my family, about the PTSD, about the failure of that administration of me and my family. The reason I retired is because they didn't want me back. They were not accepting me back. Like I did something wrong, and that feels horrible because I was a very loyal employee. I love my job. And I was a working agent. I like to work. So it's very, very difficult for me to accept that because law enforcement, as you guys know, it's part of your identity, whether you like it or not. My family members see me as law enforcement. They see a gun and a badge. It's one of those professions that it attaches to you wherever you go, even in social settings. It doesn't matter. So I did struggle a lot with my identity. I know I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a husband, I'm all these other things, but gosh, that's what I did for a living. And people, I can tell you, my own family saw me that way. So then I became a speaker. Then I became a consultant and started dabbling into the political world. And I ran for Congress. I didn't get in, but the way I figure is that I'm trying to be part of the solution here. I'll do whatever I can, use my expertise to help others, to help our country, to help my state of Texas, especially with what we're going through now.
And you're doing just that. Victor, are you part of, with all your knowledge and past law enforcement experience with ICE and everything, you're involved in some other organizations, Border 911 being one of them, but you and Jason Jones are down there, and like you said, you're often on the news all the time, but you're also doing national speaking engagements as well. And I want to tell the audience that, because we have people on LinkedIn that are watching this show right now. You need to have Victor come and speak before your event. But you've got a book out? What's the name of the book? Plug your book.
The book is Agent Under Fire. Yep. This is it right here. Agent Under Fire, A Murder and a Manifesto. you're going to get a good understanding of who I am. It's very personal. I wrote this. It's very raw. I get good feedback on the book, not because I wrote it. Believe me, when I started, I said I'm going to write a book, and I would joke around with my wife and said, I went to college. I know how to write. I'm going to write a book. But it's not that easy. It's a procedure. Let's put it that way. But I really wanted the book to be published. At first, I thought, oh, they're going to throw some money at me, and they're going to write it for me. And no, that doesn't happen. I paid a lot of money to write this book. So it wasn't about the money. It was about putting the story down.
Yeah.
And exactly what happened. And there's a lot more detail here. Obviously, you're going to get some cases that I worked, a human trafficking case and drug cases that I worked. Because I wanted people to know that I was a decent at my job. I was good at my job. And I was proud of my job. And then at the end of the book, well, I'm going to write about what I know, and it's border security and national security. So you're going to get believe it or not, this book is 3 years old. And you think I wrote it yesterday with the information that's in here when it comes to the wall, sanctuary cities, asylum, all this craziness that's happening at the border. It's in here because I've been dealing with it for years, and I put in my solutions of what I think would work to take control back of our borders in our country. So that book opened a lot of doors for me in the speaking realms. And so, yeah. And then, so first it was all kind of law enforcement. Then it kind of became different things, leadership. And then the unbelievable how his title, Agent Under Fire, it started taking a different, the more I speak in public, it started taking a different meaning of, like, if you're under fire in your life, are you under fire in your marriage? Are you under fire with your employer? Are you under fire financially? All these traumas that people have. And I want to be able to share mine. Oh, I was going to tell you that now I really talk a lot more about the aftermath, because my family and I, especially me, I went through very, very dark years afterwards. I woke up, and I'll tell you really briefly, after my physical wounds were healed, I convinced my doctors to release me, and I was back to work 5.5, 6 months later, and we went off to Madrid. I basically told my agency, send me there. We wanted to be gone, and we were kind of in that mode anyway, that international mode. So we went to Madrid, the U.S. Embassy. I said, okay, good. And of course, I'm a worker, so I start scratching the surface in Europe. Guess what? There's a crap load of drug trafficking and human trafficking in Europe. A lot. I mean, gangs in the military, in Barcelona. I mean, crazy stuff. So I start working a lot of human trafficking, a lot of trainings in Portugal, Barcelona. So I'm having a good time. 8 months into it, one day, I didn't get up to go to work. I didn't want to. And I tell it to you this naturally because it's really the way it happened. My wife told me, what are you doing? You're going to be late. And I said, no, I'm not going to go to work. And she said, are you sick? And I said, no, I just don't feel like going. And that day, I fell in a huge, very deep, major depression, anxiety. I gained a bunch of weight. My hair was falling off. I couldn't sleep. I started getting night check. Then, oh shit, this is the PTSD that they were talking about.
Right.
And it just boom. It just literally like that, without any, I can't tell you what triggered it or there was a trigger. It just happened. And my agency didn't understand it. They immediately categorized me as a danger. Or something's wrong with Victor. Take away his guns. Take away. Well, first of all, my doctors that I had, they're like, that's not your issue, Victor. The way you're responding to this is depression, anxiety. I'm not a harm to me or my family or anyone. I get to carry guns.
Right.
And so for me, the guns was a big thing. I always carried a gun almost all my life, right? And so eventually we got kicked out of Madrid, ended up in Denver. I mean, our life was made miserable by the government. And that's why I love Tom Holman, man. I love Tom because Tom came in after, and I know things would have been different under Tom's leadership. I know for a fact, him and I have talked about this. And he, Tommy is very upset. He's like, he says, when I got in there and became the director, and I started, well, what the hell is going on with Victor Avila? And there's a lot of things that were being said that were not true. I was an alcoholic. All these horrific things were being said about me. And I'm like, I'm right here. Call me. I'm accessible. Reach out to me. But no, it was stay away from Victor. Don't you email him. Don't you call him. And so everybody, coworkers of mine, they stayed away because they were afraid. They were kind of threatened. And I didn't do anything. And whether it was because of Fast and Furious that was going to come back up, whether I have no idea. All I know is that that's the way they treated us. And so I talk about that a lot. And believe me, that's because sometimes, almost all the time, someone in the audience has gone through something. And I'm not talking about a in a line of duty shooting. I'm talking about a trauma through surgery, a vehicle accident, something. And I tell them that if I have with what I went through, as hard as it was, physically, emotionally, I'm standing right here in front of them. Being able to share the story, that means that we all have a solution, right? Because we're alive. And because we're alive, I want to be able to give that and tell people my process and my journey so they can get through theirs.
So we got a great question here, Victor. The comments are lighting up here. Do you mind taking some questions?
I love to take questions.
Cool. Barbara's asking, how are things handled now in comparison to when you were in ICE?
Very, very differently. So at least the assignment in Mexico, vehicles are different. They actually ended up changing the entire vehicle. They don't use those Suburbans anymore. Different training to even get deployed over there. You have to go. We all had to go through the special State Department training. Now there's additional specific training for HSI to go to Mexico. So yes, a lot of policies, a lot of procedures. One of the best things that came out of this is now they actually have a peer-to-peer response that didn't exist. You see, with me, this had never happened, ever. DEA went through this with their agent in 1985 and Kike Camarena, but our agency didn't have it. And one of the most frustrating things to me was like, they would tell me, oh, Victor, we don't have the funding mechanism to reimburse you for that expense because it's not in the stupid binder. Well, now it is in the binder. Now it is. Now you have a response team. Now you have peer groups that will immediately go and take care of your family. A lot of the things that we went through was life goes on, right? I needed to put my kids back in school. Financially, it was a drain. My wife and I almost ended up in bankruptcy just because I got shot. And that shouldn't be the thing. So now there are new policies and procedures in place to take care of the survivors, and especially the survivors of the ones that are fallen.
Yeah. How is this Zapata family, by the way?
I wish I could tell you otherwise, but not good, man. Not good. It really devastated their family. They didn't show up to the last hearing last year in May, a year ago. We went to re-sentence these guys. The parents didn't go. They sent the older brother, Jaime's older brother, not very well. And I kind of lost a little bit of track with him the last couple of years. And it's I tell them this, and every time I hope they hear me. I know they see some of these interviews. Is that every opportunity that I get to speak, my only condition is that I will share Jaime and I's story because he deserves that. A lot of people don't know that this even happened. And they need to know that sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice, was made by him. And I will always give him that place, and I always can give him that tribute.
So, Victor, do you have a website? You have a website.
I sure do. So I have a couple of websites
out there. You need to Google Victor Avila. You gotta Google.
You could go to agentunderfirebook.com. That's one website. You could order the book through there. The speaking website is victoravilaspeaks.com. victoravilaspeaks.com, and you can book me through there. And so Bor 911, if you go to bor911.com, I'm part of the team. We're doing a lot of exciting things coming speaking. I can't wait to see you guys again at the border later this month. And so I will be there with you guys. This is what it's about. This is about the awareness. This is about education. This is about telling people the realities, because I think sometimes people might not be able to make that decision because they've only heard one side of either side, the right or the left. Well, I want to tell you the way it is. And when I go speak, I will tell you the way it is and the way things happen, the way I see it happen, especially at the border, because you're right. I spend a lot of time at the border. I remember going in March of 2021 when this whole fiasco started. And I called my friends. I was sitting in my living room and I'm like, what the heck is going on? I'm watching the news. Like, what is, I had never heard of this. Like, this had never happened before. And so I go down to, back then it was McAllen Mission area, Texas. And I couldn't believe my eyes in years. And that was in March of 2021. And there was 400 people under this bridge that had walked up and turned themselves into Border Patrol. What? Listen, that's for a person that's worked the border, it was surreal. Oh, and then we're going to process them and put them on the bus and release them into the U.S. No. You got to understand what I knew is, no, you're going to arrest them and book them into jail and charge them with illegal entry. And then they're going to go through the court system and get 6 months in prison. And if you've done it again and you're a reentry, you're going to do 2 years in prison. Oh, no, that wasn't happening. And that was the beginning of like what was to come, which we're seeing now.
Right.
Millions and millions of people.
So we're going to go to a question here, which goes right along with what you're talking about here, Victor. Ron asks, would you consider what is happening at the border an invasion?
Absolutely. Hands down. Don't question it. And I know a lot of people, oh, the invasion, the word invasion. Don't get caught up with the words. The left will I mean, they don't call them illegal aliens, even though that's a legal term. Now, I think they're forcing the Border Patrol to call them undocumented non-citizen. Give me a break. It's invasion, especially, and it's an invasion, and specifically, now we're having to learn the hard way of the Lake and Riley cases and the deaths and the violence and the property crimes and all these crimes that are happening at the hands of illegal aliens. And I'm the first one to tell you, not everybody that comes over here commits additional crimes. I know that, but I don't need one more cartel member. I don't need one more rapist. I don't need one more murderer. I don't need one more carjacker. I don't need one more burglar. We have enough of that in this country that, as a matter of fact, the police departments that I go talk to around the country tell me they're overwhelmed to begin with. And then all of a sudden they're getting this influx of illegals in their, by the way, and I know New York and Chicago and these big cities get a lot of attention, but it's the small towns that nobody talks about. The small counties, the cities, that when you get 1,000 people, it's very noticeable. And especially in the crime rates when they start shooting up.
So we're down at the border. We went to Eagle Pass. We're on to the next border area. Where are we going, Victor?
Arizona, which is the hotspot, believe it or not, even though there has been a slight increase in where we were at in Eagle Pass, about 10, 15 miles, I guess, west is Quemado and Normandy, Texas. That, look out for that here in the next month. There was a group of 150 the other day. So they're coming back. And so they're not coming through that Eagle Pass where we were at because of the razor wire. And they just can't come up through there, but they're going around. But Arizona, New Mexico, which is right there where we're going to be at, New Mexico, Arizona, California is getting hit very hard. And specifically, I think we're going to see some activity, but you're going to be kind of surprised with the type of people that are coming. They're not Mexican nationals and they're not Central Americans. The one that a lot of people expect that or normalize it, think that for some reason every illegal alien is a Mexican national. No, they're from China, Afghanistan, Eastern Europe, Ukraine, and all the Aztecans that I can't pronounce, and Africa. And all of a sudden you're going to see it. I'm going to go through the same feelings that I always go through. I'm already warning you, Alan. I'm going to get upset.
Yeah.
I'm upset, man, when I stand there and because I get that feeling of hopelessness. Like, how in the heck are we allowing this to happen right under our noses?
Yeah.
But it is, and I go through these mixed emotions every time I go there. But I love what you guys are doing because our men and women, Border Patrol, National Guard, are demoralized, overwhelmed, and they need more of this. They need people to tell them. People say, "Oh, we support the Border Patrol." No, you guys are showing them that we're going to do a appreciation day. We're going to feed you. We're going to tell you. We're going to show it, not just say it. And by the way, it's not just us, and we're going to relate it that our family members and our friends also feel that way, because it's always a good feeling knowing that you're not alone. And we're going to ask them to hang in there. Please hang in there, because this is where my optimism comes in. This is our America, and we're going to save it, and it's going to get better. So hang on. I know it's been tough for all the men and women of all law enforcement, especially Border Patrol, but even our police officers and sheriffs throughout the country. It's very, very tough to be in law enforcement today.
Big time. All right, Victor, thanks for coming on, my man. I want to give one more plug for your book and any website, all of them if you want. Give us the book, give us the URLs.
Agentunderfirebook.com. That's the title of the book, Agent Under Fire. You could go straight to Amazon if you want as well. VictorAvilaSpeaks.com. And then find me on X. You could find me at Victor Avila TX, Texas. You'll find me on Facebook, X, and I use Instagram. And I do a lot of videos. You can see the interviews that I do. I usually load them up there that I do. I recently did a podcast with Dr. Phil. That was pretty cool. And talked about that. Jason Jones, interviewed Dr. Phil down on the border. So Dr. Phil is kind of like, I really like what he's doing now. He kind of, I think, and Jason and I were talking about this. I think he kind of said, I'm going to do about something with my platform, because he obviously has a huge one. Yeah. And I've done a couple of shows with him. I did a podcast and I did his actual show, and he's really bringing it on and really making aware, because he's reaching people that maybe we can't, that watch his show. And to me, the more the merrier.
Well, we're at Texas together. We're going to be down in Arizona, and we're going to keep on going to other hot spots around there and bring awareness to what's really going on down at our southern border in the United States.
Yep.
Victor, thanks for coming on the Red Friday podcast. MP, you got any closing thoughts? We got to have Victor on again. We're not done with everything here.
I usually have a million things to say about Victor. Thank you for everything that you did. And we're just going to continue to work together and bring awareness to the issues. And thank you. I think I'm going to end the podcast right there.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for letting me rant today and go out and share. I love sharing. I love telling everybody what's going on, and I love educating people. There's a lot of things happening, and the thing about the border, you guys, I think, are finding out. There's always something new every day, every 2 days. It's changing. It's changing. Believe me. That's why I told you, Eagle Pass. We could probably go back in a couple. It'll be completely different than what you saw. That's the way this is going on. And I don't shy about talking politics, because it's in our face, right? I mean, a lot of times people are, don't make it political. It's not that I want to make it political. It's just that that's just the way it is. I mean, the reason we are is because of, which it shouldn't be, by the way. I don't know how fentanyl and human trafficking has to be political. It's killing our youth. And so I think this is something that will actually unite Americans in saying what we're trying to do here is protect the entirety of the community in the U.S. It's not just a certain group. I want everybody to be safe.
Yeah, fentanyl and sex trafficking, they don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. Yeah. They're going to come after you and kill you and whatever.
That's right.
Yeah, we got to get past this is a political thing without a doubt, and realize this is an American thing. It affects all Americans, no matter what walk of life and what city you live in or where you're from. Doesn't matter. It's affecting all of us. Victor, thanks again. MP, next Friday, Red Friday podcast, we will be here. Victor, we got to have you on again, my man, without a doubt.
Let's do it. Absolutely.
We are not done.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great one.
See you in a few weeks, buddy.
Thanks, buddy.
See you, man. Thank you.
Anyway, wow. What a story. What an American hero he's been through, MP.
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
stuff
he's
been
awesome.
through.
He's awesome. The whole team that we work with to put on these appreciation events at different cities across the country. It's awesome.
Yeah. So we're going to leave you in awe here with that guest right there.
But we will be having a part 2 of that. I can guarantee it. Maybe a 3 and a 4 because there was a lot behind that.
Yep. All right. We'll see you next Friday.
See you later, gentlemen.